Good morning, everybody. So we're going to go and get started. My name is Tyler Herrmann. I'm co-coordinator for Louisiana Clean Fuels, and this is the second part of our two-part series about pro tips for CNG fleets, where today we'll be focusing on CNG stations and kind of best practices for maintaining them and keeping them operating as well as possible. So today we're going to have a little bit of background from me about clean cities and Louisiana Clean Fuels in particular to just kind of set the stage for why we're doing this to begin with. And then we'll hear from John Gonzales, who works at the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, as well as our CNG expert panel with Chris Myers, who works with ANGI, and Scott Scrima with Clean Energy. And then we'll go into a Q&A kind of roundtable style discussion where we can kind of get into the meat and potatoes of everything. So here are our guest speakers, kind of already introduced them. And so we'll be hearing from them in just a few minutes. So let's talk a little bit about clean cities. Like, why are we here? Well, we had two bits of legislation. We're Department of Energy program, so we're born of legislation. And those two bits are the Alternative Motor Fuels Act of 1988, as well as the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990. And they spawned the Alternative Fuel Data Center, which is absolutely one of the single best resources for anything about, trying to learn about alternative fuels. It's got incredible amounts of data. It's very user-friendly, and that's been around for quite a while now. And then later on, we had the Energy Policy Act of 1992, and that's really what directly spawned Clean Cities. Clean Cities is a local partnership, a series of local partnerships. There are around 100 coalitions across the country, and within our territories, our individual territories, we make up around 80% of the total U.S. population. And then one of the wonderful things about Clean Cities is that if you're outside of our population or our territories, we'll still work with you. So if you're in any territory and you don't quite have a Clean Cities, actually part of their territory, please reach out to them because we still love to help in any way we can, and really provide technical assistance and kind of any sort of help that we can. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So, we're part of a Department of Energy program, and the priorities that kind of set the stage for Clean Cities is national security. Alternative fuels are domestic fuels. We produce our own natural gas and propane and hydrogen, electricity, of course. So kind of in, just all those alternative fuels, we all produce them here. So not having to rely on any sort of imports for those fuels, it has a lot of national security benefits to it. There's also economic growth. These fuels being domestic fuels keeps the economy kind of growing here in America. This also results in affordability for businesses and consumers. When you have multiple competing fuels that kind of all work together as part of this bigger portfolio, that competition drives the prices down. And many alternative fuels, in large part because they're produced domestically, are actually cheaper, than gasoline and diesel. And then also just reliability and resiliency. When you have redundant multiple fuel types, if one of them goes down for whatever reason, say the electric grid goes down somewhere, you can start relying on different fuel or kind of vice versa in any other direction. So that resiliency is really a valuable part of why alternative fuels are important. And so how does Clean Cities in particular fit within Department of Energy? Well, we're under the Vehicle Technologies Office, and that office has 5 kind of main components that you see listed here. The electrification, advanced combustion systems and fuels, materials technologies, energy efficient mobility systems, kind of a newer focus, but kind of looks at the entire mobility system as a whole and really kind of digs down into, well, how do different changes affect energy usage, total energy usage across the entire holistic system. It's a really interesting program. And then we have technology integration, which is exactly where Clean Cities fits. And we really work with the end users as well as the providers and the national labs to figure out exactly how we can best get these fuels in the hands of consumers and fleets, and make sure that they're working as well as possible, and then really increase the efficiency and lower the cost of operation. And then see down here below, the VTO really focuses on these 4 pillars: the energy efficiency, domestic energy security, reducing costs, and global competitiveness of the U.S. economy. And then, we deal with all the fuels. We are what we call fuel agnostic. We don't pick and choose winners. Everything that we do is data driven and tailored to the individual that we're working with, whether it's a fleet, municipality, or just, individual consumers. We deal with all 6 of the major alternative fuels: biodiesel, electricity, ethanol, hydrogen, natural gas, propane. And then across all markets, light, medium, heavy-duty vehicles, refuse fleets, transportation fleets, you kind of deal with everything. So really, in any sort of efficiency measure that a fleet or an individual is trying to undergo, we're there to help with anything that we can. And then I always like to have this slide because this is news. When you talk about greenhouse gas emissions in America, for the last 100 years, the largest sector or the largest emitter as a sector has been electricity. And that's been decreasing over time, with moving towards natural gas or renewable fuels in the electricity grid. That's reduced the carbon impact of it, and then just efficiency gains across the board as well. And in 2018 was the first year that transportation actually overtook electricity as a greenhouse gas emitter. So that kind of means the ball's in our court when it comes to dealing with transportation. Is that we have the largest slice of the pie, and we can work on that. And then in 2018 alone, Clean Cities work resulted in a reduction of 1.1 billion gallons of petroleum, which is an absolutely massive number. And that's the work that we do is increasing efficiency, moving towards alternative fuels, and that really benefits everybody. And then to move into specifically Louisiana Clean Fuels, we're a Clean Cities Coalition. We were designated in the year 2000, on April 11th. So it means that this is our 20th anniversary, and we've been celebrating kind of all year. We have our gala at the end of the year to kind of button it up and talk about the things that we've done. And you can see our territory there on the map. Cover a large part of the state. There is a second coalition in our state that we saw on the previous map. And that's covered by our sister coalition, the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership. So the entire state is covered, which is awesome because anybody in Louisiana can reach out to us or our sister coalition and make sure that we're kind of filling the needs that they have. And then our executive director, Ann Vale, has this quote that she always loves to put in these things, which is, it is our job to identify, then work to remove the barriers that prevent public and private fleets from adopting alternative fuels and advanced technologies into their fleets. And that's really what we do, is remove barriers. And I also like to say we're matchmakers as well. If a fleet's interested in something and they don't quite know who to go to get those alternative fuels integrated in with their fleet, we'll find the right person to get them in contact with. And some of our specific programmatic priorities that it's always worth talking about is our green fleet certification, where we can really recognize and quantify the work that fleets are doing in terms of reducing emissions or meeting their sustainability goals. We do a lot of outreach and education, which is of course what kind of this is part of. You can't do anything with technology that you don't know exists. So that's where we fit here, is make sure that everybody kind of knows about the different options that we have, because choice is better for the consumer, right? First responder training, the alternative fuels aren't more dangerous than gasoline or diesel, they're just less known. And we're trying to kind of break that barrier down. So we do a ton of first responder training with firefighters and local first responders to make sure that they know how to handle any sort of incident with an alternative fuel, because they're becoming more popular and more integrated into our fueling mix. And it's important to know how to deal with those situations. And then also funding assistance. We assist people who are interested in applying for grants with the actual application process or with the implementation process when it comes to the alternative fuels. And I know John's going to talk a little bit about some of the FOAs, the funding opportunity announcements, that come out of the work that we do. And we really help kind of make sure that that's all integrated and it's kind of done well the first time. And then big list of all the parishes that we cover. It's a lot. So we kind of work across the entire state. And then before we go on to the panelists, I do want to talk a little bit and just kind of set the stage for one of the difficulties with natural gas that isn't really talked about very much. And that's the fact that it's a variable fuel. So it's easy to think that when you type in or tap into a pipeline that you're going to get the exact same thing here versus in Texas versus in Arkansas or anywhere else. And that's really just not true. Here I've got a chart of a kind of a typical gas specification. So the individual gas operators or pipeline operators will have a list of specs that they have to meet. And it's always some sort of range of gas quality and of allowable kind of percentages of the water content or hydrocarbon dew points and that sort of thing. And this chart is just one kind of prototypical spec. And you can see even within this one chart, there's a huge amount of variability. There's almost 20% variability in the gross heating value. It's 950 to 1200 BTU per SEF, and that really matters. Maybe water heaters don't really care about the BTU content of the gas, but a natural gas engine really does care, and it changes how that operates. So this is not just important from the station side; it's also important from the vehicle side. And it's always worth talking about. So within one particular pipeline, you'll get variability, maybe even just seasonally, but also regionally, you'll have variability, and that needs to be accounted for. And then one thing that's talked about a lot these days is renewable natural gas and kind of how that fits into the picture. Renewable natural gas is a great complement for any state or fleet who's trying to reduce their environmental impact, but it actually behaves quite a bit differently than fossil natural gas, specifically because it doesn't have those higher hydrocarbons, the higher carbon content hydrocarbons, such as butane, ethane, and propane in it that you'll get in typical pipeline natural gas. And that results in a lower BTU content. And also what you call the inert gases, or the balanced gases, will mostly be CO2. You won't really get much nitrogen in a lot of renewable natural gas. And that really does change things quite a bit. So awareness around gas quality and the variability is really quite important. As we're talking about, especially integrating more renewable natural gas into our pipeline mix, or just into our fleet mix. So with that, we'll go ahead and pitch it over to John Gonzales, who works with Natural Renewable Energy Laboratories, and he's going to talk a little bit about what they do on the alternative fuel side, and kind of his experience specifically with natural gas. And then we'll go into the panelists.
Tyler, thank you. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Ann, for allowing me to moderate this panel. And I want to say thank you to both Scott and Chris for being our experts on this panel. They are great resources to us, and I appreciate them being here today. Next slide, please. A little bit about who I am. I'm John Gonzales. I'm with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We help manage the Clean Cities program around the country. We work with the coordinators, and just like we are doing today with Louisiana Clean Fuels, we help support them in the work that they're doing. Part of our job is to support all the alternative fuels. Today happens to be natural gas, but we are a resource for all those different fuels. And part of the program that I manage at the National Renewable Energy Lab is the Tiger Teams program. It's a technical assistance program for fleets that might be having issues with alternative fuel vehicles. We have experts that we can call upon, or experts within our own team to help with these issues. We give support to the coalitions and their stakeholders for these concerns. Next thing I work on is what they call the Natural Gas Vehicle Technology Forum, NGVTF. It's in partnership with DOE. I don't have California Energy Commission up there, but they are a very important partner, along with the South Coast Air Quality Management District in California and NGV America. We put this on to help really kind of understand what's going on in the industry, to help break down barriers, talk about those barriers, and really it's just kind of an open forum to talk about natural gas vehicles. And some of the outcomes that have come from this are DOE awarded projects. CEC, California Energy Commission, has some ongoing work that they do on natural gas vehicles that is developed from this, and finding out what those needs are. OEMs give their updates on what they're working on, what they have in the marketplace currently, and also really, like I said, what they're working on, but also how they see the market is going, and the work that they are moving forward to drive the industry forward from their standpoint. And then also NREL received what they call a natural gas heavy duty engine based on the 6.7 liter Power Stroke diesel. It's a single cylinder engine, which is kind of confusing, but it allows us to do testing on natural gas at a high compression rate. So it's very formative for us to do that, and we're working on that to make natural gas engines better. We also work with DOE on managing what they call funding opportunity announcements. There was one released a little over a year ago for $36 million that was natural gas related. It's combined with some other funds, so in fact it's even larger than that, but it's to help break down barriers that are in the natural gas vehicle industry. Also, NREL provides support to the National Fire Protection Association and NFPA 52 for natural gas, CSA for some codes and standards work, along with the International Fire Code governing body to help with codes and standards to help minimize some of the issues that we might be seeing with codes that might be out of date, and to help update those and make sure that we're operating natural gas vehicles safely. And then finally, listening sessions are ongoing. This is an important piece. Louisiana Clean Fuels has worked on this as well. It's working with stakeholders like yourselves to talk about the issues that you're having with your alternative fuel vehicles and let us know what they are, because if we don't know, we can't bring that information forward to try to help break those barriers down. So that is very important to us. So if they reach out to you, please be willing to participate. Next slide, please. A little bit about what we do as part of the Alternative Fuels Data Center. Tyler talked about that a little bit. That we put together a lot of things, a lot of opportunities for all the different fuels. This here, the Compressed Natural Gas Vehicle Maintenance Facility Modification Handbook, will help with fleets that are looking to bring natural gas into their fleet, into their facilities. In this case, really into their fleet when they don't have natural gas vehicles, and how they can work with their HJs or their authorities having jurisdiction to work on natural gas vehicles in their facilities, because natural gas is a little different than gasoline or diesel. So this helps give kind of that guidance on how those facilities will work. And then finally is CNG temperature animation. We're really proud of this. One of the challenges with natural gas, it's different than we're used to working with gasoline and diesel. It's not a liquid where we have a float that goes up and down. You are working with a pressure that wants to change with temperature. And this guidance really kind of shows you how that works and explains a little bit about tank and tank pressures and full fills and things like that. So really, Tyler, those are the pieces that I have, and I'll turn it over to you to introduce the rest of the team.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Yeah, so next we'll have Chris Myers with ANGI Energy Systems to tell us a little bit about kind of their place in the market and some of their experience with this as well. So
that's good. Well, hey, Tyler, appreciate you having us on this morning. You and Ann and Louisiana Clean Fuels. Look forward to the conversation here. As Tyler mentioned, I'm Chris Myers with ANGI Energy Systems. I'm the Western Regional Sales Manager for ANGI. I don't think I've got a bio here starting on the next slide, but I'm based out of Indiana. Went to Purdue University and graduated with a mechanical engineering degree. But in terms of ANGI here, ANGI, we manufacture systems for compressed natural gas vehicle refueling and tube trailer transport. We're one of the industry leaders in supplying that refueling equipment. We've been in the industry for roughly 37 plus years here now, and just a long-standing reputation in high pressure compression and CNG refueling. This slide here represents areas of installation where ANGI has done business and where we work. Our core business is within the U.S., but we also do have packages and actively working opportunities in different parts of the world here. In terms of ANGI's background, started in 1983, as I mentioned, around 37 years of experience. I think biggest update here is really going to be in 2012 and 2014. ANGI is currently located in Janesville, Wisconsin. That's where we package all of the compression equipment, valve panels, dispensers, and other refueling aspects of a project. In 2014, ANGI was acquired by Gilbarco Veeder-Root. So the more traditional gas pumps, liquid fuels, you'd see at a typical refueling station. ANGI was acquired by Gilbarco. And a couple of more recent updates here. ANGI has the NG100E Fleet Pro, which is geared towards smaller fleets. Excuse me. but it does allow for some expandability and quick deployment, as well as some smaller CNG equipment with our NG75 and our remote monitoring system, which I think we'll probably speak to here throughout the day. In terms of ANGI's facility, as I mentioned, we're located out of Janesville, Wisconsin. Overall facility, just over 200,000 square feet. Most of that is manufacturing space for us. We do manufacture, everything from the deck that the compressor block and motor and supporting equipment are mounted on, all the way up to, final assembly. We do have an R&D center, around 6,500 square feet. I think there's more detail on the next page, but really what our R&D center allows us to do is to, once the equipment is assembled and goes through all of our checks and balances, we put it through our R&D center, where we do a full load run test on the equipment. So what we're doing there is matching the conditions at the site. So if the site, for instance, has a inlet pressure of 100 PSI, we're able to mirror that within our testing facility to ensure that we're meeting the performance and just the overall quality of the skid that was purchased. Next slide there, Tyler. So a little bit more here on the testing facility. As I mentioned, we do test on natural gas, and a little more on our testing ranges, anywhere from 40 horsepower up to 900 horsepower packages is what ANGI looks at. We do have our ISO 9001 2015 certification. So just kind of wanted to put this up here as a slide. And in terms of maintenance and support, I think this is going to be a bigger part of today's discussion, but really ANGI wants to back our equipment through customer support, whether it be through training, our commissioning services, our repair and maintenance services, as well as just after sales support of, if there's questions on the site, we've got a 24-hour call center that can be called into. In terms of capabilities, I think, Tyler, depending on the conversation today, it may make sense to refer back to a few of these, but I wanted to highlight just how a traditional or the variations that a CNG system could have. And I'll walk through this first one kind of piece by piece, and then the other ones will just kind of mention some differences. But in terms of the CNG system, ANGI typically has an inlet gas dryer. It will be a desiccant-based dryer to remove any residual water that may be coming from the inlet source, as well as the compressors are the next piece. These can be anywhere from one compressor up to, several, depending on the need of the site, based on inlet pressure and flow downstream. This system here is showing a priority system. So if we look at the different banks of storage, what we're doing here is filling based off of differential pressure. And we do that through actuation of valves within the priority panel. So in using the 3-bank priority system, we're going through that system, and that's where we're using CNG dispensers for fast fill applications, where you can fill based off of that differential pressure. And then if you have gone through all 3 of the banks, we start at low, go to mid, and then high. If the demand pressure of the vehicle isn't met after we've gone through all 3 of these banks, then a compressor is started or is redirected to direct flow a vehicle up to the temperature compensated pressure that John was speaking about earlier. As well on this slide, we've got the time fill panel kind of in the upper right-hand corner. Time fill is another means of filling vehicles if there's a period or a window of time where a vehicle can sit and fill up based on compression flow. So it's going to take flow directly from the compressor, go through the time fill, and you could stage anywhere from one vehicle up to hundreds of vehicles to fill based on compression. Really, depending on the time fill window that's available, and then generally the next day the vehicles are filled up and ready to go for their shift. Next slide there, Tyler. This one, fast fill system, I think we've kind of gone through this, but this is removing the time fill aspect of the system. And then also here, we've removed the priority system, and we've got the time fill panel, time filling the vehicles. As we show here, and what we'll likely discuss today, is we're showing two compressors on the site here. One of these can potentially be sized for the entire demand of the system, and then have one compressor to allow for redundancy, or they could be equally sized to meet the demand. And then if there is a potentially a maintenance concern, or if a compressor is offline for a period of time, there's still a compressor that's able to run to add redundancy for the system. This slide here, compression experience, I think we've kind of gone over this. Brake horsepower from 50 to 400, and experience range from 10 to, I believe it's 900. That 800 appears to be a typo. But in terms of markets served, anywhere from the refuge industry to retail convenience stores. One thing that we're seeing, and Tyler and John both mentioned it, is biogas, whether it be compressing biogas for vehicle refueling, or injection into pipeline, or other alternative means for the biogas. All right, next slide here is the aerial compressor that's at the heart of the next two units that we'll see. The aerial compressor is manufactured out of Mount Vernon, Ohio. ANGI was actually the first company to package an aerial compressor for CNG compressor applications. Typically, we're looking at applications with an aerial that are ranging from 125 horsepower up to that 900 horsepower range. But more commonly, we're looking at the JGP, the JGQ, and also the KB100, which is a slightly smaller unit. So on the next slide here, this is the NG300E. This is if you've seen an ANGI station, this is typically one that you'll see on the site. Flow ranges and inlet pressures are illustrated here. One thing that's nice about the aerial systems and the ANGI package itself is we can look at an inlet pressure for a site, and from that, as long as we understand the demand flow that's needed, we can size specifically for a site to make sure that the demand is met. The next slide here is going to be our larger packages, the NG600 and the NG900. Similar platform, but just larger materials here for these two compression units. And I do want to mention integrated systems, whether it be a quick deploy system for something that needs to be on site for, a period of, say, 6 months, or if it would be a permanent installation. We can look at a system where it's all packaged into one, may reduce installation costs and things of that nature. And this last slide here, just wanted to mention a couple of other aspects of the systems that ANGI packages. We've got the gas dryer that's ahead of the compression that we saw on the previous slide. The picture here in the middle is going to be the valve panel, really the brains of the operation for the site. We do have motor starter panels that accompany our compressors, as well as gas storage for that differential filling that we spoke on. I think that's all I've got.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And then next we'll hear a little bit from Scott Scrima about clean energy and kind of what they do, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So take it away, Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Scrima. I'm the director of South Central Regional Operations for Clean Energy. Been in the alternative fuel vehicle industry for 24 years, give or take. Started in the vehicle conversion side of the business. Did vehicle conversions, did some engine conversion stuff as well. Started with clean energy in 2003. Worked here a couple different times, doing various things. But started in the compression side of the business, actually, then went to the vehicle side, and now back into the compression side. So graduated from Texas A&M with a mechanical engineering degree. Never really used it, but yeah, you can go to the next one. Clean Energy was founded in 1997 by Team Boone Pickens. Most of you have probably heard of him. Became Clean Energy. It was ENRG for several years. Pickens Fuel Corp, then ENRG. And then in 2002, it became Clean Energy. Right now, we have roughly 1,000 employees in our subsidiaries, and that's worldwide. We are traded publicly on the NASDAQ. Right now, we have about 500 plus public and private stations around the country. There are 7 stations in our Louisiana, Mississippi area. The company-wide, we have 175 service technicians in 6 operations regions. In the South Central region, we have 22 technicians and supervisors. My area is New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana, and parts of Mississippi. Clean Energy provides transportation fuel for a variety of industries, refuse, transit, airport support. We fuel roughly 30,000 vehicles every day. And we do pretty much everything when it comes to clean energy or alternative fuel stations. We do CNG, LNG, LCNG. We design, build, and maintain stations. That's basically it.
Thank you, Scott. And now I'll kind of go into the kind of roundtable discussion. This is really kind of where we're going to talk a lot about the sort of specifics and some of the things that we really need to be paying attention to whenever you're operating and maintaining a CNG station. So I think that this is going to be mostly moderated by John Gonzales, but if you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A and we'll make sure to get to it.
Great, Tyler. Do you have any questions in yet?
We do not, so
okay.
Go ahead and...
Okay. The first one, Scott, is for you, if you don't mind. How do you address oil carryover that might happen with a CNG station?
There's a couple ways, mainly with filtration. We have a series of filters throughout various stages of the system. There's sometimes filtration on the suction line, filtration inside the compressor, filtration post-compression, either on a K-rail on a time fill station or filtration into dispensers. It depends, gas quality, as somebody mentioned earlier, is a huge factor when operating natural gas vehicles. Gas quality varies, all over the country. Some areas have better gas quality than others, and so it's difficult sometimes for us to filter out some of the non-gas hydrocarbons that are in natural gas, but we do the best we can. We dry it first, obviously, with a gas dryer on the suction line before it's compressed, and then try to filter out anything that's carried through the gas, and then obviously try to limit how much gas or how much oil we allow the compressors to pass as well.
Great. Hey, Chris, a little bit along that line, what do you recommend as far as how often should these filters be drained at the station?
Sure, it's really going to be kind of station by station. One thing that we're able to do is identify, through performance software, a pints per day consumption of the units, because they are lubricated compressors and they do consume some oil. As a result, we do, as Scott mentioned, have filtration throughout the systems. But really, it's going to be building a site-specific maintenance plan. There are recommendations, for daily checks as well as weekly and monthly checks. And depending on, kind of the rolling maintenance program of the system, you can kind of dictate how often you need to be checking certain items or addressing some concerns. But really, it's going to be at least having someone dedicated to perform daily checks initially, and then kind of tailor your program based off of that.
Great. I wonder if you could, I might be going the weeds a little bit here, but explain a little bit about the challenge of taking oil out of high pressure natural gas, because there's been studies out there, GTI has done a lot of work in this space, where oil wants to stay suspended, what they call in an aerosol state within natural gas at high pressure. Could you address that a little bit? And that's why the importance of this filter draining takes place and how you monitor that. Can either one of you address that?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, and Scott, feel free to chime in if you've got anything else. But in terms of filtration, it's really going to be looking at the size of what that filter is, not mainly from a capacity standpoint, but an overall gas velocity standpoint. If we can slow the gas down, then we have a better opportunity to catch that oil that's kind of within the gas stream.
Yeah, catching gas at high pressure is very difficult. Obviously, after you drop the pressure, gas will fall out of the gas. It's a little easier with low pressure filtration or lower pressure filtration, like on a vehicle, for instance, to catch some of it. But the aerosol problem is a big problem with high pressure gas.
So Scott, what you're saying is that's why people, when they drain the low pressure filter on their vehicle, that they're seeing that oil come out of there. I mean, you've done all you can along the stream, but there still is that challenge that oil wants to stay suspended. So it's important when they drain those vehicle filters as well as those station filters, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of sometimes where, maybe the ball gets dropped a little bit. Stations, like to your point, we do the best we can, keeping it as clean as we can to the vehicle, but vehicle operators have kind of a role to play also as far as maintaining those vehicle filters. So, and that's something that we try to work with fleets with, kind of as a reminder of that importance, right? Sometimes we'll analyze the vehicle filters, and it's pretty evident that they haven't been serviced in a while, and so we'll kind of work with them to kind of reiterate the importance of that.
Yeah, just how they work hand in hand with each other.
Right.
That's good to know. Hey, I know Chris in his presentation talked about compressor redundancy. Kind of what is your philosophy behind that, and how do you recommend when somebody's looking to size a station, build a station, how they look into compressor redundancy for their operations?
Yeah, so from an operations standpoint, there are several factors to take into consideration when you're sizing compression for a station. As Chris kind of spoke to, suction pressure is huge. just overall vehicle capacity. How much fueling are you going to do on a daily basis? Is it a time fill station? Is it a fast fill station? All those things are sort of key factors in kind of sizing the station. And then as far as redundancy goes, how critical is the fueling, right? If it's a transit fleet that has a daily rollout, redundancy is very important. Obviously, compressors need to be maintained on an hourly basis. So if you had a fairly major maintenance of 5,000 or 10,000, or in ANGI's case of 4,000 or 8,000 hour, overhaul to do, those take time, and so you need to have some redundancy to keep fueling the fleet when those things occur. So there are a lot of factors. A lot of it, again, like I said, depends on the fleet and sort of the duty cycle of that fleet.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think, maintenance is one piece, without a doubt. It's a mechanical piece of equipment.
Right.
No matter what we do, if there's moving parts, something is going to fail. It's not that you've done anything wrong, something will fail. So it is wise that the fleet makes sure that they have that redundancy just in place. For one, maintenance. You bring that one machine down, the other one can still fill the fleet, so you take that out of there. But also, second, is that whole piece of, if there is a failure, you do have that in place. That's big. And also, it makes it so you don't have to have a technician always on the ready, right, Scott? That you don't have to be ready just at a moment's notice to go get that thing back up and going.
Yep, that's correct. And the stations are designed controls-wise to kind of, take over, right? If you have a station that faults, if you have a station that's been sized with equal size compressors, so one compressor can fuel the entire fleet, the other is redundant backup. Controls-wise, the station will kind of take care of itself. If that station goes on, if that one compressor fails or faults, the other compressor will start to keep fueling the fleet. So obviously not all packages and not all systems are designed that way, but most of ours are. And then the reliability of equipment, the aerials and the aerial compressors and ANGI packages are super reliable. And that also needs to be sort of factored in when you're speccing compression for a fleet, right?
You bet. Thanks, Scott. Hey, Chris, wanted to talk a little bit about advancements in fulfills. We talked about temperature compensation a little bit earlier. I talked about that animation that we have on the alternative fuels data center. But would you talk about a little bit how, ANGI's done a lot of work in the past on this, and I know you guys continue to do research to make this as efficient as it can for the customer, to make sure they're getting as much fuel on board safely, correct? And
Yep.
As we know, fuel tanks are a big price of the vehicle, right? And if we can make sure we're maximizing the fuel we put on board, then we might not have to put one more tank on that we thought we had to before. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So in terms of vehicle refueling, as I mentioned, ANGI's got a long history in CNG equipment, and what we've been able to do over the years, and John, you mentioned it's a continuing effort, is base our algorithms on the refueling that we're seeing, aligning with the codes that also apply, meaning that for temperature compensated filling, 3,600 pounds on a 70-degree day is the target. If the temperature is trending a little bit higher, then the pressure in the vehicle would also need to trend a little bit higher. But along with that, as I mentioned in one of the slides, is we do see the gas may be warmer than the ambient temperature that the vehicle is sitting at. So what we've done there, and it's kind of fine tuning with our engineering team, is have our temperature compensated algorithms along with a boost pressure to accommodate for heat of compression. Now, that's not necessarily meaning that we're reading the temperature of the gas, but really just kind of making up for the heat of compression. And John, I think your group does a lot of work, and I think there's more work to be done in the industry for this. for, understanding exactly what that heat of compression is and what it's doing and how it's reacting with the tanks. But in terms of the algorithms available today, mostly based off of ambient temperature compensated fills.
Scott, your thoughts on that? A little bit more, any? No?
Lost you.
Okay.
No, I
can't-
lost you. Are you?
Oh, yeah, we're still here.
Yeah, I lost my audio. Can you hear me?
Okay. We can hear you just fine.
I can hear you.
Bet. Yeah.
Yeah, hang on. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Chris, I just wanted to add to that just something that's kind of a rule of thumb, and it's not, I mean, so when you talk about an algorithm, it's just that device that you're looking at for temperature versus pressure, right? So, I mean, I've always said, and if you look at our chart, it's not linear, but it's pretty close, right? It's close. It's not perfect. It's not an ideal gas, what they call an ideal gas. But so natural gas, like you had said, at 3,600 PSI, say if you had a tank that you put 10 gallons on board, you got 3,600 PSI at 7 degrees Fahrenheit. If you were to take that tank, not even take anything out of it, and this is where people get really confused, I think, and that's the struggle with station providers, right, as far as this temperature compensation. If you took it into a refrigerated building that was 0 degrees, you now drop that temperature 70 degrees. What's going to happen is that gas inside that tank is going to contract about 700 PSI, about 10 degrees roughly plus or minus that 70, that 100 PSI per 10 degrees plus or minus that 70. So we are now, that tank will say probably 2,900 PSI. If we're to bring it out and bring it to a 100-degree day, now it's going to say another what?
40, what's that going to be? 4,200?
Well, so we went 30 degrees up, so now we'll be at 3,900.
3,900.
So, 3,900. So, and that's what throws people off with a fuel gauge, right? They might fill it one time, and then the next it moves. They didn't have a leak. It just was that temperature compensation. I know you guys are working on that really hard to try to minimize that as much as you can. And I know that the people that build the vehicles are working hard to give accurate fuel gauges so people understand that. But that's what that algorithm is based on, correct?
Exactly. And I think the important thing to note here, John, is, the pressures can swing a little bit based on the temperature, but that same amount of energy is still there.
Right.
Yeah,
so
that
10, like I said, that 10 gallons, that 10 gallons didn't change, right? At 2,900 pounds or 3,900 pounds, it's still 10 gallons worth of energy in that tank.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, great. So Scott, I know we talked about you back online. You working there? It seems to be okay, or?
I can see you talking, but I get like about every third word. So, but we can try.
We're hearing you just fine, Scott. So
Okay.
Just so you know, fine.
Okay.
You talked about a dryer. I know Chris had talked about that's part of the package. You talked about a dryer. Can you elaborate on the importance of a dryer at a fueling station? Because some people might say they have dry gas. They meet the specification for the pipeline, but when it comes to a vehicle, that could be different, right? Can you talk a little bit about dryers and why they're important?
Sure. Again, as we said earlier, gas quality changes. People think they have dry gas sometimes, but they don't. So obviously removing liquid of whatever type from the gas before we compress is very important. Liquids won't compress, as everyone knows. And so trying to keep trying to send as dry a gas as possible to the compressor is super important. The dryer won't take everything out of the gas, as we spoke about earlier. That's why filtration is important. But having a gas dryer on a station, we have some stations in Texas that don't have dryers. Customers didn't think they needed them, and over time we have had issues. Pipeline, take a slug of moisture of some variety or another, and it'll pass through the compressor and damage the compressor. So gas dryers are very important.
Can you talk about I know you've got that mechanical background, you and I have a little bit of history there. Can you talk about when it gets past that compressor, that moisture gets past that compressor into the vehicle, how it can affect the operation of the vehicle itself?
So one of the things that really creates havoc are NGLs, non-gas liquids. They look like oil. They sort of are viscous like oil. People will find them in their vehicle filters. They'll feel something that's kind of oily and sticky. But for modern, especially modern heavy duty engines, they create a lot of havoc with sensors. The older Cummins engines had a mass gas sensor, for instance. It's a thin wire where air and gas went across a wire, and it basically determined how much gas and what the air fuel ratio for the engine was supposed to be. Well, if that gets gummed up and dirty, then obviously the engine's not getting a proper reading, and it won't run. Creates a lot of other problems with other components. Some other light duty vehicles, for instance, it'll gum up injectors. It can gum up the fuel rail to the point where it won't pass the proper amount of gas. Again, sensors, rail pressure sensors, pressure sensor in the high pressure regulator on a vehicle, for instance, can get gummed up with whatever that is that's coming through. Again, NGLs are a big problem. So yeah, it creates a lot of havoc with sensors and vehicle components, engine components.
Thanks, Scott. Hey, Chris, I know folks might come to you and say, hey, I want a time fill system, but really they might need a fast fill system. It might be better for them. How do you kind of make that determination when somebody's asking you what is really the best for their application?
Sure, absolutely. In terms of a time fill system, generally the first question that we need to ask is there a period of time that a vehicle can sit where it can refuel over a period of time? Generally, we're targeting around 8 hours, not just for a single vehicle, but for a fleet of vehicles. So in that same regard, we would look at how many vehicles there are, how much gas do we need to output in a period of time, and understand the inlet pressure for the site. Once we understand those three things, there's some other variables involved, but those are the three bigger ones. We can size compression or number of compressors that would be needed for that site for a time fill application. If you're in a scenario where you need to refuel quickly, similar to pulling up to a truck stop where you'd fill up with diesel in 20, 30 minutes, obviously depending on the size of the vehicle, but we would be able to look at sizing a compressor or a series of compressors to meet that flow demand to get you back on the road if there's not a period of time where the vehicles can sit to refuel in a time fill application.
Great. Hey, Tyler, those are really the questions I had. Do you have any, or either Chris or Scott, do you have any final thoughts? I want to be respectful of everybody's time on this webinar.
I have a couple of follow-up questions that I've kind of thought of throughout this. And I think one of them is, we've talked a lot about oil carryover and then the non-gas liquids and how much of a problem that can cause. Are there any, how is that monitored? How much oil carryover you're getting? Because that will increase over time as maybe your rings wear in the cylinders on the compressors themselves, or as the filtration, the dryers kind of age, or we start getting differential pressures there. How is that actually kind of monitored? And are there any common pitfalls that y'all seen when it comes to monitoring those that maybe the people who do the maintenance are maybe not quite seeing, and that they could, kind of a tip there for finding that actual solution and make sure that you're keeping that monitored very well?
Gotcha. Yeah, Tyler. Go ahead. I think it's kind of an all-in-one, based on maintenance. We mentioned the oil for the compressors. Generally we understand how much oil a unit is going to use over a period of time. And with a maintenance program in place specifically for the station, the vehicles will also play a role here. But we talked about filtration. That filtration is going to knock that oil out of the system. And if we know, how much oil a unit should be consuming or utilizing, we'd want to see that same amount of oil or very close to that coming out of the filters or the storage of the system. And then we know if we've got, for instance, if we do an oil change and we have to add an extra gallon of oil that we didn't find on the back end, and a gallon's kind of extreme, but we know that it's likely passing on down the line into the system, and we need to get to the root cause of why that's occurring, whether that be adding additional filtration or, Tyler, as you mentioned, if there's a more serious or a bigger maintenance, whether it be through rings or some other aspect of the system passing oil.
Yeah, from an operations standpoint, our maintenance technicians during their PM checks, whether they're weekly, on some stations daily, some stations are even monthly, we record how much oil we pull out of the scrubbers. And to Chris's point, there is an acceptable amount of oil that comes from the compressor, and an acceptable amount of oil that will service the ANGI compressors. We also use IMW compressors, which are technically oilless, but they're not. They use oil in the crankcase, but there's theoretically no oil above the crossheads. So if we're seeing oil there, that typically will tell us that we're having ring or packing issues. But yeah, we record that, and then we track that through our maintenance system, and kind of are able to generally tell whether our ring and other internal compressor component wear is normal or whether it's abnormal and there's some additional maintenance required.
And then I think maybe the last question that I have is, when it comes to maintenance programs, some fleets will want to do their own maintenance on compressors that y'all put in. Do y'all have particular recommendations on how they should get their mechanics trained, or would y'all generally just recommend that they have a maintenance contract with somebody else? Kind of what are y'all's thoughts on how maintenance should be done, kind of best case scenario, and then maybe what some of the pitfalls are there as well?
Well, ANGI and Clean Energy are both in the compression operation business, right? So we do maintain compressors, and obviously, I think my recommendation to start with would be to hire somebody that's what they do for a living, right? That's what we do. That's what ANGI does. People that have years of experience, people that are trained to kind of know and be able to determine the little nuances and things that happen with operating compressors. Obviously, though, a lot of our customers do their own maintenance. We train them in a lot of cases. We have a training facility in Denver where we'll send customers to the same training that our technicians get. If they want to do that. Majority of our customers choose to just have us maintain their station. We have a couple of different maintenance contracts that we have with our customers. We have an operations and maintenance, that's us turnkey. The customer fuels and we take care of the rest. Anything that goes wrong with the compressor, anything that goes wrong really with the facility, we fix it, and that's part of their monthly charge. We have a repair and maintenance contract with some of our customers as well, where it's a kind of a monthly visit. We go by and we do our PM checklist on a monthly basis. Sometimes it's bi-monthly, 2 times a month. And then in between, the customer maintains the site themselves, mostly just servicing, PM servicing, oil servicing, oil draining, filter servicing, that kind of thing. And then any kind of major repairs we'll do. But again, my recommendation or my suggestion would be, if I was looking to build a CNG station today, and I would probably opt for somebody that's what they do for a living. Some of our fleets that operate or do their own maintenance. Their technicians do other things. They're truck mechanics, they're, you know, equipment mechanics, whatever, and they don't really give their full focus to the, you know, CNG compression side, and that's what our guys do every day. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I also mirror Scott's comments there. The one thing too with the, you know, if somebody is fully maintaining the station, to Scott's last point, is you would really want somebody that is dedicated or has the time, if you're doing it locally, you know, whether it's your daily checks or weekly checks, just making sure that that person has the time to, you know, perform those checks, and it's not kind of a, you know, hey, we got to it this week, didn't get to it this next week type of thing. But you know, overall, similar to Scott, ANGI also offers training programs. I think we probably work closely with you guys, Scott, on you know, cross-functionally training employees and things like that. So that's what I've got.
Another thing too, you know, other than just maintaining the compressor, you know, as far as servicing oil and filters and things like that, is whoever does it needs to kind of acquaint themselves with it. And the best way to do that is to watch it operate, to just kind of stare at the HMI as it's operating and kind of get a feel for what the temperatures and pressures are and what's normal on a hot day, what's normal on a cold day. And by that, you can kind of determine if something's starting to go wrong, right? If, you know, lower stage temperatures are starting to go up, and, you know, it's not a hot day out, it's kind of a normal ambient day out, you know, that's a sign that there's something going wrong inside the compressor valves or rings, whatever. And somebody who's sort of kind of intimately acquainted with that compressor will notice that by watching the machine operate regularly. A part-time mechanic, guy who's working on a trash truck on Tuesday and changing oil on a compressor on Wednesday, probably not gonna have that kind of relationship with the equipment.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a good point about, you know, sometimes you hear problems before you see them in some of the data. That's a good point. John, did you have anything else that's going to come up?
No, I think we've kind of hit a lot of them, Tyler. We've hit a lot of them. I feel pretty
Awesome.
good. I'd leave it to Chris and Scott if they had any final things that they thought that maybe we should address that maybe we haven't.
I guess not on my end here, but been a pleasure being a part of the webinar today. If there are any questions, you know, that do come in after the webinar, or you know, really just any questions in general, feel free to reach out to myself and Scott, and happy to work and discuss further.
Absolutely, me too. Yeah, anybody has anything that comes up when we're done here today, feel free to reach out to me at Clean Energy, and we'll do our best to answer any of those questions you might have.
John, any closing thoughts from yourself as well?
You know, I want to say thanks for these two experts to be here, and thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for everybody that is stuck with us to listen to what we had to say, and hopefully they were able to bring away something that will help them within their fleets.
Yeah, and you know, I echo that. Thank you all so much for participating. I think this is good. We touched on a lot of really important topics that I think are, you know, not as always talked about in the industry. So I really appreciate it. And again, you know, y'all feel free to reach out to any of us if y'all have any questions in the future. And if that's what we're here to do, is help out with these sorts of technical questions and really try to dig down. So really appreciate everybody today. This will be has been recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel, and we can send that link out to all the attendees so that you kind of have access to that in the future as a resource. And again, reach out if you have any questions. Thank you all so much.
Good, thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.